Okay. Okay, let's see who's coming in. Welcome, everyone. We are going to get started in just a moment. I'm going to do a screen share in a sec and see who's coming on in. All right, so we got folks showing up. This is great. So, for those of you who are new to the Teen Science Cafes, I am Lauren Traster. I'm the 4-H Teen and Leadership Program Coordinator here at UVM Extension. So nice of you to join us. If you're in Vermont, you know that it's a beautiful sunny day. So I am very appreciative of you all coming inside to join us today. I'm going to pop into the chat box right now. If anyone needs our closed captioning services, there's a link you can click on. And thank you, Knight. You know the drill. So we always like to start with introductions. So if you could find your chat box and open it up and tell us who you are and where you are from. It is always so fun to see where everybody's coming from. So take a moment, introduce yourselves. Hi, Lily from Vermont. Where are you from in Vermont? Let's actually find out what city or town are you from? So let's all introduce ourselves. Waterford. I'm coming from Hyde Park today, so that's where I'm sitting. So who else is with us today? Go ahead, introduce yourselves. Hi, Simon and Jack, Montpelier. Who else is with us today? It always is so nice. Hi, Leo from Greensboro. Oh, you're up in my neck of the woods. I always like going to Greensboro in the summer for that ice cream place by the beach. Sage from Monson, Maine. Awesome. Welcome, Sage. Cash is from Derby. Matthew from California. Thanks for joining us. Cari, I think I told you, but we do usually get participants from other states. Matthew just proved that all the way from California. Matthew, where are you in California? Are you in Northern California, Southern California? I love California. One of my favorite places to go. So as you all are still introducing yourselves, let me just remind you when we are here in Zoom, all of you are muted and nobody's video is on except for mine and our presenter. Nobody can actually unmute themselves to talk, but that doesn't mean we don't want you to participate. So we do that two ways. We have the chat box, which you've just been using, and that's going to be your means to communicate back and forth with our presenter today, share your thoughts and answer questions she might have as a way to have a conversation. And there's also a Q&A box, and that's where you're going to put your questions for our presenter. We get to every question, but we might not get to it right when you ask it. It's just going to be depending on where she is in the presentation. So your questions will get stored there, and we'll make sure that we go through each and every one of them before we end today. The cool thing about the Q&A box, you can actually upvote a question. There's a thumbs up. And so if you like a question somebody asks, you can click on that thumbs up, and that just lets us know more people are interested in the question. But again, it doesn't matter if you're the only one who wants to know the answer to a question or 10 of you do. It's just great to just, see what other people are asking and just be like, oh yeah, I like that question. So we just ask that you be courteous and kind to one another. Again, you're using the chat box, and we just want to make sure you use it appropriately. So don't create any distractions. So really what that means is don't have random conversations that don't have anything to do with today's topic. Stay engaged. I know today's topic is really interesting, so it's going to be a good one. And just participate. It's more fun for both the presenter and yourselves if you actually participate when she asks questions. So before we get to today's presentation, I just want to remind you all that there are some other programs being offered through 4-H. This is our second Science Cafe in our spring series. So there is going to be a Science Cafe every week all the way into, I think, the second or third week in June. So hopefully you'll keep coming back week after week. Tomorrow we start a new Learn to Code program. This one is going to be teaching you how to create your own custom animation using Scratch. You can still sign up for that if you're interested. We have a program that's going to be happening through National 4-H this summer called Citizenship Washington Focus. Normally it's a trip to Washington, D.C., but with everything that's going on with COVID, nobody can travel. So they're offering this program virtually, And it's going to be a really interesting program. It's being offered for a few hours every Monday for like 5 weeks in a row. And we here in Vermont, for Vermont teens, and this is for Vermont teens only, we are offering we're offering 8 scholarships to cover the registration fee completely. So if you think you're interested in learning about citizenship and leadership and government, this might be a program to check out this summer because it won't cost you anything. And then there's some other programs that are on our website. There's a herpetology program coming up. There's some career exploration. There's a gardening program. And I know we're going to be starting to announce some summer programs because we're pretty sure we're going to be able to offer some in-person stuff this summer. And so just kind of be on the lookout because I think things are going to start coming out pretty soon on that. So let's get to today's presentation. So today we are going to hear from Cari Reynolds on outsmarting the outbreak, keeping diseases at bay with biosecurity. So let me just tell you a little bit about Cari. Cari is a Ph.D. student in the Department of Animal and Veterinary Sciences at the University of Vermont. She earned her undergraduate degree from the University of Scranton and has a master's of public health from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. After nearly a decade of working in the pharmaceutical and rare disease drug industry, and also a brief stint in academic medicine, Cari returned to her agricultural roots to help bridge the gap between animal and human health. Her research interests include improving management strategies to reduce disease incidence and alternatives to antibiotic use in dairy calves. So let's all welcome Cari to our Teen Science Cafe. Thanks for joining us today, Cari.
Thank you, Lauren. It's been a pleasure. I'm excited to be here. All right, whenever you're ready, I can hop in and share my screen.
Sorry, I unmuted myself for saying, yes, go ahead, share your screen. You're good to go.
All right. Good. Okay. I feel like this question is just now very commonplace these days, but can everyone see my screen? Okay. All right. So hi, everybody. Like Lauren said, I'm Cari Reynolds. I'm currently a PhD student at UVM, and I'm really excited to be here to talk to you guys today about a topic that is very timely, especially now since we've been in the middle of a global pandemic for almost a year. So what I'm going to talk to you about is how we keep diseases under control and keep them from getting into populations when we may not always have a pharmaceutical tool or medicine to do that. So we're going to talk today about how we can be disease detectives and also how we can outsmart disease outbreaks just by being smart. So to jump in, I'll just give you a little more intro to myself and my background and my career path because it's kind of different. We'll get our feet wet with epidemiology, and we'll talk about how it's like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. Then we'll go into some disease outbreak questions. We'll look at who gets affected, why, when, and where they happen. We'll talk a little bit about biosecurity and biocontainment and how we use our toolbox, so to speak, to be able to prevent diseases from getting into populations. We'll do a little comparison. I know everyone's probably burned out with hearing about SARS-CoV-2, but it's actually a really good teaching tool for something like this. So I'll give you a little idea of how we've used it in the past to control pandemics. Then we'll talk a bit about biosecurity and zoonotic diseases. And then I'll leave you at the end with teaching you how to find credible information online when you want to learn about a disease. There's a lot of ways that we can find things online, but how do we know if all of them are really true or the right thing to be looking at? So I'll give you a few pointers on how to do that, and then we'll wrap it up with any questions. So we do have a poll question to kick off really shortly. I'm curious to know what grade you're in, what science topic interests you the most, and what is your favorite kind of cheese?
So we're going to have to do this one at a time.
Okay.
So first, quickly, if you see the poll come up, and if for some reason you don't see the poll, just put your grade in the chat.
Yep.
But out of curiosity, let's see if everyone, we should have a couple more, but maybe you can't do it. There we go, other, okay. So it looks like the majority are in that 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. All right, now our next poll, she wanted to know what are you interested, what science topics interest you the most? biology, chemistry, environmental science, forensics, ooh, I spelled that wrong, physics, or I typed wrong, or other. So you can only pick one. So which one is out of this list are you most interested in? If you choose other, put it in the chat what your other topic is.
Yes, please, I'd like to know.
There's always a slight delay. So if you wrote other, oh, language, yeah. Okay, so we're gonna end this poll. And then what is your favorite kind of cheese? So you can choose between Swiss, American, Brie, Gouda, Blue, Cheddar, or the ever popular Cheese Whiz. And KL put Parmesan. That's right. If it's not on the list, put it in the chat.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Parmesan in all caps. I like it. I like the confidence. Cool.
I always go with Gouda, and I say Gouda is Gouda. Yes, corny jokes. I apologize. All right, it looks like cheddar takes the win though on the cheese. All right.
Cool. That was just for my own interest, and I like cheese, so I think other people should talk about cheese too. So.
There you go.
All right, you guys ready? As we go through, I'm going to ask you questions as we go along. So feel free to hit me in the chat box. There's no wrong answer. I'm interested to hear what you think. So this is a great way for us to engage with each other, and also for you guys to kind of play disease detective along with me. So, all right. So now here's an introduction to me. I'm originally from Lennoxville, Pennsylvania, which is in Susquehanna County. So you can see it's the map colored in red at the very top part of the state. I got my undergrad degree from the University of Scranton. I majored in biology, graduated in 2008. I was a pre-med concentration. I originally wanted to go to a medical school and be a human doctor. Obviously did not do that. Wasn't sure what I wanted to do after I graduated, so I took a little break, entered the workforce, and while I was doing that, earned my master's of public health in epidemiology from the University of Massachusetts Amherst in 2015. While I was doing that, I focused all of my studies on agricultural public health because I did grow up on a dairy farm, and that's always been an interest and a solid part of my life. So I wanted to find a way to merge the two, human and agricultural public health together. And of course, while I was doing that, I really fell in love with epidemiology, and we'll get a little bit into that in a few more slides. Now I am currently a Ph.D. student in the Animal and Veterinary Sciences department at the University of Vermont. And my original career plan way back when I started college in 2004 was to be a cardiac surgeon. So some of you may be familiar with the area I'm from. If not, if any of you have ever watched The Office, you may be familiar with Scranton, the Electric City. That is the closest metropolitan area to me. And there's another reason why Scranton's been really important lately. Can anybody tell me who in a very public eye who was recently elected president might have an importance to Scranton? Joe Biden, our 46th president. That is his childhood home. He actually grew up about 2 blocks from where my grandparents used to live in the same neighborhood. So I went up and took a picture of his house because that's not weird, but yep, so that's where I am from. It's a fun point to talk about. A little bit more about me on the personal side. I'm a bird mom. In that one picture, you can see my 4-year-old Myers parrot Kiwi being very concerned about why I'm wearing a hat. I'm an outdoor enthusiast. I love all things outdoors, which is part of why I love living up here in upstate New York. I am a kitchenista of sorts, self-proclaimed. I'm an amateur ice cream cake maker. Down at the bottom is one of my most recent creations, and I like to call myself the accidental gourmet because I like to throw recipes together, and sometimes I'm really surprised at how good they turn out. I am a lifelong cow nerd and horse girl. I grew up riding horses and, of course, raising Holstein cattle. So I also love to write, and I freelance write on occasion for Horde's Dairyman, which is a national dairy farm magazine. As far as my career path goes, it is not linear by any means. The picture on the left I found one day, and it's the most accurate description of what I think my career path has looked like to date. But what I'm here to tell you today is that is absolutely okay. You may start out in one direction and end up somewhere you completely did not expect to be, which is how I am where I am now. I started out working at Sanofi Pasteur, which is one of the largest vaccine manufacturing companies on the East Coast. I worked in vaccine manufacturing for the seasonal influenza and the bacterial meningitis vaccine, Flozona Menactra. There's a pretty good chance if you received one of those vaccines anywhere between 2009 and 2014, there's a good chance that I had something to do with it, which is kind of a cool thing to get to say. In 2014, I moved to Boston to work for Sanofi Genzyme, which is another subsidiary company of Sanofi. I was quality assurance for clinical trial material manufacturing for rare disease drugs. So my department actually made the clinical trial drugs that went into the phase patients to test them before they're commercially made available and approved by the FDA. I did do a brief stint in academic medicine. I went to work for Boston Medical Center, Brigham and Women's Hospital, and Mass General Hospital in Boston as part of the BEST CLI trial. The National Clinical Trial Register number is there if you want to look it up and learn more about it, but it was a surgical superiority trial that evaluated 2 different surgical techniques. So I was the national trial manager for that, which was a lot of fun. I got to travel and meet a lot of people doing that. I also did a brief stint in the craft beverage industry. I'm a microbiologist by education, so I found out that microbiology is used to make carbonated beverages. So I spent a little bit of time running quality assurance labs for breweries, which was a lot of fun and a definite party trick to be able to talk about, because people don't think beer science is a real job, but it totally is. And now, like I said, sometimes you end up somewhere you never ever expected, which is how I came to be at the William H. Minor Agricultural Institute in Chazy, New York. So we are an agricultural research institute located in the Champlain Valley of Northern New York. We are unique in the sense that we're a working dairy farm. We milk over 400 registered Holstein cows. Those are the black and white ones. And we also have over 30 registered Morgan horses here. Milk from our farm goes to make Cabot cheese. So if you eat Cabot cheese or buy Cabot cheese, thank you. You are not only supporting us, but you're supporting a lot of other dairy farmers whose milk goes to Cabot cheese. Plus Cabot cheese is delicious. And we offer a really wide variety of educational opportunities to people all around the world, whether it be local farmers in the community that come to learn for a day, whether it be students that come for a semester or a summer, or visitors that happen to pop in and check out our grounds. We have a lot to offer. So I'm very happy to be here. I landed in the place that I am definitely meant to be, even though I never expected it. So I'm glad that I took the chance and came here. So I am a graduate research assistant doing all of my research here. And well, cows are amazing. I mean, look at these things. Okay, so while I was in grad school, I started to understand a lot more about something called the OneHealth Triad. So hit me in the chat box. Has anyone heard of OneHealth, and what do you think it means?
And just, there's always a delay while they are writing.
Okay.
So hopefully someone's taking a stab at that question. But maybe not.
All right, no worries. So what the concept of One Health means is that the health of humans, animals, and the environment are all connected. If there's an impact in one sector, it usually has an impact on one or both of the others, no matter what, because we all interact with one another and we all play off of one another. So the approach to public health means that you utilize the One Health approach, and that's what a lot of public health programs focus on now, is understanding and acting in such a way to promote health between all 3 sectors. So you want to utilize and promote all of these practices for health for all, not just one sector. So there's a lot of One Health concepts and research areas. If you guys want to throw some out in the chat box, I'd be interested to hear what you think of some areas that might be an interest for One Health. I'll start you off with one because it's a big one and it's something it's very commonly talked about. Health and Alice May, the health and well-being of all creatures is tied to the health and well-being of all others. Yes, nailed it. Very good. Okay. Here's some more. So as you can see, there are a lot of opportunities for work and research within the One Health realm, because if you really stop and think about it, all of these things connect all three sectors. It may not be something that you originally thought of, but if you stop and put a little more thought into it in detail, you'll start to see that everything really is connected. Here are some job realms that you can also consider within One Health. They're very, very broad, so there's definitely something for everyone. So what got my attention about One Health in particular were the things with the stars next to them. As I went through my master's degree, I started to realize just how frequently agriculture and public health crossed each other. But it seemed to me that there were a lot of research gaps in animal and human health and how they're connected. So combining all of these together led me to my current PhD work at the University of Vermont. So I don't have an official thesis title yet, but my approach is management strategies for disease prevention in dairy calves. Okay, cool, Cari. So why dairy calves? Well, first of all, calves are born with no immune system. They are basically a blank little slate. So when they come out of mom, they are pretty much clean. They are very, very susceptible to disease. Mama cows don't pass antibodies to the calves through the placenta like human mothers do. It's mainly because the cow's placenta is too thick for it to happen. There's too many layers. So they come out with, so they have to get colostrum in order to receive antibodies. And not only is a sick calf a very uncomfortable calf, just like you don't feel the greatest when you're sick, they also don't grow up to be a high producing cow. And for the producer, that can be a detriment. And also from an animal welfare perspective, we don't want to see sick calves. And for calves, since they are pretty clean when they're born, diarrhea is the biggest threat to their health, because in their environment, there's a lot of bacterial pathogens and viral pathogens that can make them very sick. But what's interesting is a lot of these diarrhea pathogens that cause illness in calves can also cause illness in us as well. And that's where you see a lot of the foodborne illness pathogens come from. So this is a perfect One Health umbrella encapsulation. So reducing diarrhea in calves means we've got healthier calves, we can keep the people that are working with and around them healthy, and we have a healthy environment because we're not shedding all of that bacteria back in. So in particular, what I'm interested in looking at, and this is kind of a public health and also a consumer concern, is the reduction of antibiotic use. What's important to understand, though, is that antibiotic use reduction is important across all sectors. It's not just one area's fault. We need to do better in human health. Agriculture needs to do better on their side as well. It is a collective effort that needs to happen. Not one side is responsible for it solely. So what the best tool that we have, and this is going to be the lead into the entire talk I'm going to give today, is we already have strategies in place that we can use to keep animals healthy without having to use drugs, or in instances where we don't have drugs to use. So I want to take these tools that farmers are already using and help improve them in order to better prevent disease. So pharmaceutical tools not always available or effective. And another thing I'm also interested in, and some of you may have heard this before on the news, maybe natural alternatives to antimicrobials, such as an essential oil or a bioactive or a plant-based product. On the bottom, we have a picture of cinnamon, which makes cinnamaldehyde, which has antimicrobial properties. In the middle is magnolia bark, and on the right is oregano oil. So all three of these have recently been tested to evaluate their antimicrobial properties, and they're showing some promise. So we may have new tools to use in place of antibiotics, and that's some really important research that's coming down the pike. So I'm excited to be part of it. All right, let's dive right into epidemiology. So there's a lot of deep science that goes on when it comes to epidemiology and really researching a disease outbreak. But when I teach it, I like to approach it in terms of putting together a jigsaw puzzle. You guys like jigsaw puzzles? I totally did as a kid. I still love them as an adult. But I think they're a really good explanation of how epidemiologists work to figure out disease outbreaks. So my next question to you is, does anybody know what the definition of epidemiology is? And you can give it to me in simple terms. Hit me in the chat. Okay, Sage says study of microbes and antibiotics. Okay, close. study of diseases and how they spread through a population from Leo. All right. This is the guy that looked at the water system. Yep, we're going to get to that. Yes, you are correct. All right, so the correct answer has come from Leo. Epidemiology is the study of occurrence and control of diseases within populations. So epidemiology wasn't always a thing. 1854 was the first documented epidemiological investigation, and whoever mentioned the water pump in London is absolutely correct. That's absolutely what this is. So a bunch of people kept getting sick from drinking water in one particular corner of London. So this got the attention of John Snow, who was a British physician, and he started to look into why these certain people were getting sick and where it could have been coming from. So after a series of investigations, where I believe he went door to door asking people questions about why they were sick, he eventually traced the source of the outbreak to this water pump, and that's why I have this picture here. London actually left this water pump here, and this is now a monument to him as a tribute to all the work that he did. So he is known as the father of epidemiology, and this was the first documented epi investigation. And it kind of spearheaded the way for the rest of epi investigations, therefore. So like I said, epi is a lot like solving a puzzle. If you dump a jigsaw puzzle out, you have a bunch of pieces all over the place. Some of them are upside down, some of them are on the floor, they're all scattered. You know what the picture looks like on the box, or you may have some idea of what it's supposed to look like, but what you have to do is you have to pick through and find each of those pieces in order to see what the whole picture is. And that's what we have to do when we have a new disease outbreak and we're trying to figure out where the heck did this even come from. So it's our jigsaw puzzle. Eventually, you're going to sort through the pieces, you'll arrange them, and the more you find, the clearer the puzzle picture is going to get. It might take a little while, but eventually it's going to make a little bit more sense to you. And we'll get to this in a little bit with a specific case study, but sometimes you have pieces that don't exactly fit right away or at all. Like maybe they're a completely different puzzle piece from another puzzle that ended up in the box, but for whatever reason, the end result makes total sense. So sometimes if you have a giant puzzle, like you have a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, you're not just going to reach right in and grab a piece and just kind of start putting them together any way you choose. What you want to do is you want to kind of narrow down your puzzle pieces and figure out where it is you want to start and what you want to look at first. Look at first to see which makes the most sense and which direction you want to go. So how do epidemiologists track disease outbreaks and predict spread of cases? So here's a great way of looking at it in terms of COVID. So we've been trying to figure out, where did COVID come from? How is it going to spread? Where was it going to spread within populations? So there's a lot of different ways that epidemiologists can do that. The first one is portrayed on your right at the bottom of the screen. This is a GIS map. It's Geographic Information Systems, and you can look at this on levels from counties all the way up to the entire globe. And this is basically a heat map. It basically, the darker the color, the more prevalent the cases. Disease reporting systems. When you go to a doctor's office, if you have a confirmed case, your doctor's often required to report it by state in order to maintain that database so we know where cases are and where they might go. Some of you may have, I think probably all of you have heard of contact tracing. That was a big thing with COVID, and it still is. When you go someplace like to a doctor's office, they ask you if you've been in contact with anyone who's had COVID or if you've had symptoms. Keeping track of those symptoms will help you know if there are any probable cases in the area and how you can further manage it. And like I just said, every state has reportable disease requirements. Just there's a lot of diseases that absolutely by law must be reported to the state because they are highly contagious and have the potential to spread, so they need to be kept track of. Field investigation. Sometimes you absolutely just need to go into the field and see what's going on for yourself. So epidemiologists will often do that. They will go to an area where an outbreak may have occurred if there's a significant number of people, and help local and state health officials try to figure out the problem and how to stop it. From what data you do collect, you can do case projections, and that'll help you determine which area the outbreak may go to, which direction it may spread, and you can alert that area ahead of time to help them prepare in order to avoid the outbreak. Think of this as starting at the corner of the jigsaw puzzle, right? And if you get the pieces and you piece them together in toward the middle, you can kind of see what the picture is going to look like that way. And in extreme cases of outbreaks, like if there were to be another epidemic, there is what's called active surveillance. So there is a team called the EIS, it's the Epidemic Intelligence Service. And think of these guys as the FBI of the CDC. Like they're a team of physicians, veterinarians, public health officials, PhDs, and all of them are trained and ready to deploy in the event of a pandemic or somewhere there's another serious health event to help people keep control and help manage the spread. So if it's really bad, they're going to send out EIS to assist. That doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it is usually pretty severe. So remember what I said about having that big pile of puzzle pieces, and you don't just want to dive in and kind of rummage around. You want to narrow down what you want to work with first. And one way to do that is to figure out where the most common amount of pieces are coming from, or what your common theme is going to be. So what we're going to take a look at now is our very first case study, and this is the Oswego Church Supper case of 1940. So when you're in grad school for public health, when you first learn about epidemiology and how to conduct a case outbreak, this is the study the CDC uses as their gold standard. This is what they use as like the epidemiological case study in terms of whittling down information to finally find the missing puzzle piece to put the entire picture together. All right, so it's 1940. 80 people attended a church potluck supper in Oswego, New York. Potluck is when everyone brings something different. So there's a lot of variety. 75 of these 80 people fell violently ill with food poisoning about 24 hours later. So out comes a field epidemiologist from the town of Oswego. This person interviewed every single person to find out what each person ate at the supper to try to figure out what the common food was that may have caused the food poisoning. So this is where we whittle down our puzzle pieces. This is where we sort out the trees from the grass from the water to figure out which one we need to put down next to make the most sense. Anybody want to guess as to what the food was that the most people consumed? I'll give you a hint. It was dessert. Take a shot. Cheesecake, brownies, nope. Think cold. Yep, Emily got it, ice cream. The dish that the most ill people had in common, ate vanilla ice cream. So sure enough, the epidemiologist took a sample and sent it off to the lab for bacterial testing, and there was contamination in the ice cream, likely from the raw milk used to make it. It was 1940 and it was rural, so pasteurization was not quite a thing in that area. So when it comes to disease surveillance and communication over the years, I remember doing this myself. There are some times when I stop and think, wow, like I don't remember ever hearing about this disease or that disease when I was growing up. But there's a reason for that. So let's take a look at what we have in terms of equipment and surveillance methods from 1850 up until now. So anybody want to take a shot at what the average life expectancy of somebody in 1850 was? Sage, very close. Close. 49, close. All right, not quite, a little bit less. 40. Emily got it again, 40. So the average life expectancy in 1850 for Americans was 40 years old. I'm going to put that into a little bit of perspective for you. I'm 35. That's terrifying. Thank God we don't have that now. So the reason for this is if you think about what life was like in the 1850s, there was really limited travel and transportation. We didn't have any of the options that we have now to get around. And people, unless you lived in a city, you lived in a really rural area. You didn't have neighbors, and if you did, they were like 4 or 5 miles away, which could take you a day and a half to reach them if needed. Town was often a day's walk. If you wanted to go somewhere, you hitched up your horse and buggy and went, or you walked. So you had really no way to get around, and people mainly just stayed put. We didn't have any reliable reporting or diagnosis methods. So oftentimes when people got sick, doctors chose from one of two 2 or 3 things that they knew generally based on symptoms. So we never really knew for sure what was circulating out there. And sadly, if you got sick, you either made it or you didn't. A lot of people either were treated homeopathically at home because the doctor was often too far away or too expensive. And whomever died at home, it was likely their disease was never reported. And even if the doctor did come out, like I said, it's likely they may not have known exactly what it was. So we just didn't have the tools that we have today. So now that we are back, we're in the 2000s, the average life expectancy now is 79 in the United States, which is, I would say, a considerable improvement over 40. We have so many sophisticated tracking, reporting, and monitoring tools. We have so many diagnostic options to be able to figure out what diseases are, where they go, who's had them, and what may cause them, that now they're a lot more visible. We also have a lot more outlets in order to report them. We have the media, you have, innumerable health resources. It's very easy to go on the internet and even get to your own healthcare portal if you go to the doctor. You can look up health information just about anywhere, and that's a whole other talk for later. And we have vastly improved healthcare and pharmaceutical resources. You don't have to fly to town to go see the doctor. You don't have to wait for the doctor to come to you. You can do telehealth now. It's really easy for you to find healthcare if and when you need it. So there's a lot of reasons why we hear about diseases more. It's because now we have the tools to learn a lot more about them. So now let's get into the meat and potatoes of a disease outbreak. Let's look at how one happens, who's affected, when, and where. This is fun. So when I was doing my master's practicum, I worked a lot with a public health nurse. And this is one of the phrases that she said to me one day, and it absolutely stuck. And it's the theme that I'm going to follow for this part of the talk. Everything, no matter what it is no more than a plane ride away, or a car, or a boat, or a truck, or you get the picture. Transportation and movement now in this day and age is so unbelievably easy, and we are able to go so many places. And unfortunately, so are diseases. So that's why we have to be really careful. All right, this is a fun little thing. Yes, this is a bathroom picture. However, there's a reason for this. So there's going to be a poll question for you guys. I want you to tell me, what is the dirtiest thing in this bathroom?
All right, is it the light switch, doorknob, toilet, sink knob, or paper towel dispenser? Take a guess. Let's see what we got. Right now we have a tie between, oh no, sink knob just took the lead. And let's see, now Kale said in the chat doorknob. So right now it looks like the majority are thinking sink knob.
Okay, cool. So if you said anything except the toilet and the paper towel dispenser, you're correct. Toilet's not really an option here, and I'll tell you why in a second. So great job to anybody who picked these. Yes, that's the appropriate train of thought, and that's how I want you to think as we go through the rest of the slides in this section. So the important theme here is think about your path of travel. Anywhere you go, it's not something you really think about every day, right? Like we walk around, we go from place to place, we type on a keyboard, we touch our phone. Movement is one of the biggest causes of disease outbreak, because it's so easy for us to move around, and it's unconscionable now that we do it, or unconscious, sorry, that we do it, that we don't really think about it. So if you think about your path through a bathroom in terms of clean and dirty, you open the door, you shut the door with your dirty hands, you turn on the light switch with your dirty hands, you do what you need to do, turn on the sink with your dirty hands, wash your hands, now your hands are clean. When you go to leave, what do you touch in this room that would theoretically recontaminate your clean hands on your way out and undo it all? These 3 things, right? Yep. You're going to open that doorknob and you're going to touch that doorknob, which is theoretically dirty, and you're going to recontaminate your clean hands. So it's kind of it's a different example, but I want you to keep that in mind as we talk about movement around and like where we go and what we do every day and how much of an impact that has on disease spread. Okay. I like to move it. We all do. We all like to travel. We all like to go places because we can. But travel and transport for everybody and everything, animals, plants, and humans, is so easy anymore. Imports and exports are really, really common, as well as leisure travel. How easy is it to run over to the nearest airport, hop on a plane, just go to Florida for the weekend? You can, right? Because it's easy and there's always flights. But what this means, it's great for us, but what it means is it really raises the opportunity for disease and invasive species spread. If any of you are fond of kayaking or boating or live near a lake or a river, have any of you ever seen zebra mussels in a lake or a river? They're those little things that they're just all over the bottom. They have a stripy shell. If you live in Vermont near Lake Champlain, they are all over Lake Champlain. I always open the door down with a paper towel. Yes, Simon, rock on. That's what I like to hear. Yeah, so you guys have seen zebra mussels. Those are an invasive species. Those didn't get here on their own. Those came because people didn't wash their boats when they were moving from place to place and brought them here on their boats, and they just spread like crazy in lakes. They choke rivers and choke lakes and butt out other species. So think about if the plane is the kayak and you were the zebra mussel and you have a disease and don't know it and you go someplace, you're taking that disease with you and you could leave it there. And that's not really great. And also it brings up the chance to bring back previously eliminated diseases. So case study number 2, let's take a look at this one. Oh, sorry. So we have to behave, even though we may not be sick or may not be feeling sick, we have to move and behave as though we could be. And conscious movement and behavior is one of the biggest keys to limiting disease spread, as we've seen with COVID-19 and social distancing. Anybody here been to Disneyland in California? I have not. I've been to Disney World in Florida, but if you have, great. So if you've ever been to either one of these places, or I'm sure all of you may know about Disneyland, who goes to Disneyland? Just about everyone, right? Like everyone from all over the world. It is the happiest. Yes, kids. Kids do go to Disneyland. I like to go as an adult. But people from all over the world come to Disneyland. It is that popular of an attraction. So what happened in 2015 at Disneyland in California? We had a measles outbreak. So when we have the very first patient to be identified in an infectious disease outbreak is labeled as patient 0. So in this case, patient 0 was an unvaccinated 11-year-old whose only recent travel history was to Disneyland in California. They first reported their symptoms on January 3rd, 2015. There were a total of 131 total cases reported within a very short period of time. 42 of those people reported having traveled to Disneyland at the same time that patient 0 was there, or the exposure period. For what I don't know of how familiar you guys are with measles, it's very similar to any other respiratory disease. It spreads very quickly through droplet transmission. So if you're around someone who's coughing or sneezing and has it, you will get it. It's highly contagious. We may never know the source of this measles outbreak. It is still unknown. We have no idea who the person was that brought it here or where they went after that. So you may be looking at this and thinking, okay, like 131 cases, that's not really high. You know, that's okay. What's the big deal? It is a humongous deal when the previous number of cases in the United States for 15 years prior was 0. Why? Because in 2000, we had successfully eradicated measles from the United States. And it was easy enough to bring back because of some people traveling to Disneyland from someplace else. So let's take a look at why that may have happened. So these are countries that still have measles. The United States is colored orange because unfortunately with that outbreak, we did bring measles back. As far as I know, it is still here. It's just in relatively smaller numbers now, but that was a huge deal for us because we worked really hard to make sure that we could say, hey, yay, we're at 0 measles cases, and then that happened. So all of these cases that are in darker red are countries that have considerably high number of measles cases every year. So if you think about all of these people from all of these countries, also who may have different vaccination schedules and protocols than us, are coming to the United States with potential measles infections. If they're asymptomatic and not showing any symptoms, or if they're traveling and are incubating, but are still able to spread, they're bringing it here. So think about it, how easy it is for this to happen and where else in the world it could happen. Here's another picture that has to do with movement that freaked me out a little bit. Do you see the dot that says Atlanta down here in the corner? So see all the red lines coming and going out of Atlanta? For those of you who may not know, Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport in Atlanta is the busiest international airline hub on the planet, meaning that more international flights come and go or stop over in Atlanta than in any other airport. So that's a lot of people coming through and going everywhere. Just think about that for a minute. So when we see a disease outbreak, you may notice that some people get sick and some people don't. So what I want you to think about right now is like when you guys go back to school in the fall or after a particularly long break, this happens more, it happens a lot, and I saw it a lot when I was in college, but I'm pretty sure it happened when I was in high school too. What kind of happens like the first couple of weeks of school after everybody's been back together for a little bit? Age, you get sick. Yep. That is exactly right. So we used to call it the crud in college because everyone got sick with this really nondescript, nasty thing and no one absolutely knew what it was. But yeah, that's absolutely true. Everyone gets sick, right? Because you're bringing back all these people from other environments and you're mushing them all back together and you're all exposing one another. But health is a constantly dynamic state. Like there is no such thing as someone is always perfectly healthy or someone is always sick. Like we are all in a constantly evolving and changing state of health depending on what's going on in our life at the time. And genetically, some people are just healthier than others, and that's just how it works out. But what's important to know is that disease emergence just doesn't happen because it's bored and wants to come out to play. Disease emergence is always a result of some type of change. So if you go back to the school example, that's a change. That's a big change from what if you had been home for the summer for a couple of months. Now you're coming back, you're with your classmates, you're stressed out, you've got a new schedule, a new locker, new places to figure out where to go. Your habitat's different. You're all crammed together with people you haven't seen in a couple of months. You're going back to school lunch from whatever diet you were having. Hygiene, we won't go there. It's a little personal. And your social interactions, like maybe you've made some new friends, maybe you're not interacting with other people. But all of these set the stage for why we see a disease outbreak, not just in the school population, but all over the globe. But whoever gets symptoms really depends on where their health bar is. So if you're someone whose health bar is kind of toward the top, like it's green, like in a video game, like you're feeling pretty good. But if you're just on the cusp of maybe not feeling great, that will tip your health bar down to red, and that's when you'll get sick. So it really depends on just where you are in your state of health at the time. And that applies to animals too, not just humans. Really glad we're already homeschooled and still are homeschooled. Yeah, Simon protecting herself, nice. Your health bar is permanently a green, Simon, nice. Okay, so another big change, especially when it comes to animals and disease outbreaks, is something called a land use change. So these are a couple of land use changes. We know what we've seen in wildfires. It's been a big object in the news lately over the past couple of years. Anybody know what this is? There's my chat box. There it is. Landslide, not quite. Losing forest. Yes, this is what's called deforestation. This is clearing forest land that was previously occupied just by wildlife for either pasture land or to build houses. And anybody know what this is on the bottom? Yep, sprawl, Leo got it. This is called urban sprawl. This is where you start to see cities and suburbs start to overflow into wilderness areas like this little square of houses going. So what happens in this instance is all of this encroaches on a wildlife environment. So when you start to encroach on a wildlife environment, they start to run out of places to go. It's a habitat change for them. It's a habitat change for you. And this is where we see the perfect storm start to brew for a disease outbreak. So before I go any further, I'm going to quickly define a few terms for you that I'm going to use the next couple of slides that you may or may not have heard of, but I want to clarify what they all mean. So a reservoir is essentially a source for a disease, but one that can also spread the disease to others. Can anyone think of a common reservoir, an animal reservoir? Mosquito, yep. Bats, yes. Tick, yep. Bats, yep. Okay, good. So mice are actually a reservoir of Lyme disease. A lot of people think Lyme disease comes from tick or white-tailed deer, but it actually comes from the small white-footed mouse, which is one of the most common mice in North America. Ticks get the Lyme disease from the mice and then spread it to other animals and unfortunately us. So a host is different than a reservoir in the sense that a host can get the disease, but won't necessarily spread it to other people. If it's a state where they can or they can't, depending on the situation, they're also known as a reservoir host, but it's more common just to call them a host. So deer are the hosts for the Lyme disease. Deer will get Lyme disease, but they can't spread it to other deer. The tick gives it to them. And a vector is an insect that transmits disease. So I saw a mosquito in the chat box. Fleas, flies, ticks, even the arthropods, like there's caterpillars that can be vectors by accident. Any insect has the opportunity to be a vector. So I just wanted to quickly define those for you guys so you knew the difference. All right, let's go back to the habitat change really quick. Okay, so how many of you remember seeing in the news or see stories like a bear wandering through a neighborhood or a bunch of turkeys? I used to live in Boston, and turkeys would terrorize the streets of Boston like weekly, and it would be on the news. And I remember, because I grew up in the country, so I'd be like, why are you guys afraid of turkeys? But I guess if you're not used to turkeys being in the suburbs, seeing them is a little bit alarming. But that is a result of the land use changes that we discussed before. So what this means is the wild animals are going to run out of places to go eventually. So they're going to encroach and interact with domestic animals and humans. So that increased interaction can be an issue. Domestic animals can interact more with wildlife. You might see raccoons and dogs, raccoons and skunks coming into your yard. Anybody's dog ever gets skunked, that's a wild animal and domestic animal interaction. You can interact domestic animals and humans. When you see more of these around your neighborhood, you have the opportunity for them to be in your space, and wildlife and humans. Sorry, domestic animals and humans, meaning livestock and farm animals, not wildlife. My mistake. Okay. So when you have these new interactions happening, the disease can introduce itself into what we call the naive species. So if you have these new animals coming into a space where you've got, say, dogs, cats, and other domestic animals, or horses, cattle, and sheep, those are the naive populations. So if these animals are carrying diseases that have not yet been introduced into this animal population, that's when we see something called a spillover happen. And that can introduce a new disease reservoir. That can then spread the disease to these new animals, who can then spread it to other animals or humans. And it also allows the disease to hide in the population. And we'll look at a really cool case study in a couple of slides where a disease did just that and confused the heck out of epidemiologists for a while. All right, here's our first disease spillover. All of these. Oh yeah, I've never seen a wallaby. They're like a small kangaroo. Yep, rabies is good. Yep, that's definitely a spillover disease. All right, so our first spillover that we're going to talk about is called bovine tuberculosis. Remember the deforestation slide that we saw before? So there was an expansion of grazing land. But what that means is now there's an increased opportunity for contact between the cervid animal group, which is the white-tailed deer, the bison, and the elk, and the cattle whose pasture they were near. So all these pasture land was being built into forests, and now it's coming into contact with the deer with what they call fence line contact. So all these deer were coming in contact with cattle, and what was unknown at the time is these cattle herds were infected with something called Mycobacterium bovis, which is the causative agent of bovine TB. So the deer, because they were grazing in the same field as the infected cattle and eating out of the same feed trough as the infected cattle, were then getting bovine TB. They became a new reservoir for bovine TB, and it's spread by droplets, so it was easy for the deer to catch it from sharing food with the cows. So what happens now is the deer are a new reservoir, so they can also spread bovine TB back to other infected herds if they're going to other places where there's new fence line contact that's just been brought into their environment. So the disease continues to propagate that way with the spread of new reservoirs. This was especially problematic in Michigan recently over the past 5 or so years. And it's very, very problematic around Grand Teton and Yellowstone National Parks. I'm not sure if anyone's been out there. Grand Teton National Park is a huge elk reserve. It spreads most of the park. I've seen it. I did not see a single elk, which I was really disappointed about, but a lot of the fence line contact with the infected animals was happening out here and was really hurting the elk and bison population in these two parks, which is really the main attraction for both of them. But scary thing is it can also be spread to humans. TB is, thanks to vaccination and control methods, is very, very low prevalence in the human population. And most people get TB and don't ever show symptoms. It remains latent within your body and can never do anything. It will just, I don't know if any of you have ever had a tuberculin skin test for TB where they inject a little bit of protein under your skin just to see if you've ever been exposed. But most people will come up with a positive TB test and be very confused. But it turns out they've been exposed and just have never shown symptoms. But the droplet transmission can be dangerous to humans as well as drinking raw milk. Hunters in Michigan have also been infected with bovine TB from butchering deer in the field. And these are the tuberculous lesions in a deer's chest cavity. And hunters have cut open the chest cavity and have opened the lesions by doing that and released droplets into the air and have breathed them in. This is the disease that would puzzle epidemiologists that I just mentioned. So it's 1994. A stable full of really expensive racehorses in Australia contracted an unknown hemorrhagic fever. I won't go into the details of what hemorrhagic fevers are, but they're terrible, and these horses did not die a very nice death, unfortunately. Case fatality rate, which means the number of people that die after being diagnosed with the disease, for this instance was 75%. That is extremely high. Hemorrhagic fevers tend to have a very high case fatality rate. The horses' stablemates also became ill, and what was puzzling is the people who were working with the horses became ill, and about 57% of those people died as well. So this had epidemiologists scratching their heads for a number of reasons. Anybody want to take a shot at what might be going on here? Oop. I just gave away the answer. Clicked on the wrong thing. Where is my chat thing? My chat thing is not showing up. Where is it?
I'll tell you right now, nobody has made a guess.
Okay. Yeah, oh, there we go. There wasn't a vector anyway. There wasn't a vector. That's a common reservoir in some countries. Okay. All right. So what we're looking at here, and this is a hallmark epidemiology case, along with something else called Nipah virus, which emerged in Malaysia a couple of years later in 1999. So what we have here is something called an intermediate reservoir, what I like to call the Cinderella puzzle piece, and I'll tell you what that means in a couple of seconds. So in this case, whoever said bat, yep, you are correct. So epidemiologists concluded there must be another source of the HENDRA virus because unlike bacterial infections, viruses need a living host to survive. So if both the humans and the horses died, it would mean that the disease would be self-limiting. So it had to be coming from someplace else. Where was it coming from? This little guy, the fruit bat. So more horses and more humans fell ill, and fruit bats were the natural reservoir, and horses were what would be called the intermediate, and they spilled over to humans. All right, so when we don't have drugs for something like this, we have to rely on non-pharmaceutical interventions. So that's where biosecurity and biocontainment comes in. Anybody know what the difference is between biosecurity and biocontainment? Okay, so biosecurity, there's one slight difference between them. Biosecurity is practices designed to keep diseases from entering a population, and biocontainment is what we need to do to control diseases once they get in there. So just a little bit different. Why do we need it? Okay, like we talked about before, Ease of travel and transport for everything is extremely easy. Concern over antibiotic resistance means that the tools that we did have don't always work, so we need to find ways around it. Community health and safety measures. If the public is going to be at risk, we need to find ways to manage it without using pharmaceutical tools if necessary. A lot of times when we have brand new diseases emerging on the scene, for most of the time, we don't have any vaccines or treatments available, so we have no choice but to rely on management. And pharmaceutical tools aren't always useful or appropriate. I will skip this slide for the sake of time. Sorry. So what we do, a lot of the practices that we looked at for COVID-19 are also in place to keep animals healthy, and they're very, very similar. So these little calves are doing a really great job of social distancing. They spread out apart on their own, which I thought was great. We were asked to do that in terms of the latest disease outbreak. PPE in the form of masks and social distancing was required for COVID-19. We do this when we're working with animals to keep ourselves clean and safe as well, and to keep us from spreading diseases to other animal age groups. This falls in with social distancing for us. We minimize nose-to-nose contact with younger and older animals to reduce aerosol transmission and illness, just like we were asked to do. There was a news story on this just this morning. Adequate ventilation in buildings is a big thing to make sure there's enough airflow to keep stagnant air from staying in buildings and recirculating germs. Avoiding overcrowding, reducing the number of people allowed in businesses, closing down businesses for the time being. Separating age groups. Some of you may not have been allowed to see your grandparents or older relatives during COVID-19 for this reason. We do it with animals too, to keep younger animals away from older, to keep diseases from being passed that way. Sick or animals new to the herd are quarantined to make sure that they aren't harboring anything when they come in. And for us, our form of biocontainment was if you were sick, you were asked to isolate. Hygiene is obvious, again, won't go there, a little bit personal. Health checks, just checking in with yourself or going to the doctor to make sure that you're doing well. Same with a herd veterinarian to make sure that your animals or your pets are doing okay. Real quick, I'll go through 2 diseases that we don't have drugs for animals that we need to rely solely on management to keep out of the population. So African swine fever is one of them. It's a swine hemorrhagic fever that's shown up in sub-Saharan Africa recently and is currently spreading through some of the Eastern Asian countries. It is not transmissible to humans, but it is extremely contagious in swine. It is not yet here. It needs to stay that way because we don't have a treatment or vaccine. And if it were to get into the American swine population, it would wipe out a considerable amount of pigs, which would not be pretty. Another one is Johne's disease, and this is particularly detrimental to cattle. You can see the cow on the left is not looking so great. It's caused by Mycobacterium avium subspecies tuberculosis. There's a lot of wildlife reservoirs and environmental reservoirs for it. Targets the intestinal tract and it causes severe persistent diarrhea. Younger animals are at risk. It can be passed from mom to baby through milk, or if the calf comes in contact with feces and the mother is infected. It's very similar to Crohn's disease, which is an autoimmune irritable bowel disease in humans. A lot of animals don't show symptoms, but will shed the pathogen in huge amounts into the environment, and other animals will come in contact with it and get exposed. So the issue with this is we had a Johne's vaccine up until 2019. The manufacturer discontinued it for unknown reasons, so we don't have any way to control it anymore. So it's really important that we rely on the biosecurity protocols to keep Johne's out of our herds. And one more thing really quickly, the 1918 influenza pandemic was used as a comparison point for SARS-CoV-2, and there's a reason for that. So this took place between 1918 and 1920. It actually killed more people than were killed total in World War I by about 10 million people. Just like with COVID, there was no vaccine available, so we had to rely on biosecurity. And using masks and social distancing and limiting crowds was not a new thing because major cities did this. San Francisco, Chicago, New York, cities all over the world, or all over the country rather, adapted these protocol measures to keep people safe. People complied and it worked. The pandemic got under control rather quickly. So the whole concept of mass social distancing and spreading out and limiting business is not a new concept. It's worked before and it can work again with pandemic. So I only have a few minutes left, so I will hurry through these next couple of slides. I just want to introduce you to some zoonotic diseases like that we can get from animals and run you through a couple of the common ones just for your knowledge. Quick poll question. If you just want to throw it in the chat, that's totally fine. But what percentage of all known diseases have an animal origin?
Yeah, put your guess in the chat. We'll see what you all think. 25%, 50%, 75%, or 100%.
All right. So the majority is 75% that I'm seeing. And if you said 75%, you are absolutely correct. That's a lot. We are not quite at 100%, but this is, keep in mind, this is all known diseases, and there may be a lot more that we don't know about that yet. But the chance for there to be spillover and for us to contract disease from animals is still pretty high. So, zoonotic diseases, as I just said, are diseases that can come from animals and can be passed from humans. So there's a lot of them that can be shared between the two populations. Foodborne illnesses, you may hear a lot about E. coli, salmonella, listeria outbreaks. They all have animal origins, and that's how they all get into your food. A lot of zoonotic diseases don't have a vaccine or a cure. We do have some treatments that do work, but overall, there's not a lot we can do for them, especially if they're new. So we have to be really vigilant about how we manage them. And biosecurity is the most important key in keeping this disease risk low when we don't have the other tools to manage it. So I'll put all these up here. This is a by no means all-encompassing list of zoonotic diseases. If anyone has any questions about these, like more specifically, you can hit me in the chat at the end, or you can email me and I'll be happy to talk to you about them. But this is only a few and there's a lot more, but these are the ones that you hear about pretty commonly. Yes, plague, especially like the Black Death plague of the 1340s. That's a fun one. All right, real quick, E. coli is a very, very common foodborne illness pathogen. Causative agent is Escherichia coli. The Shiga strain, E. coli, is the most toxigenic to humans. That's the one that's most associated with foodborne illness outbreaks. It is O157H7. It can be extremely dangerous to you. It can cause hemolytic uremic syndrome, which is extremely dangerous to the kidneys and can make you end up on dialysis if it's severe enough. Most animals carry this in their gut. They are what's known as an asymptomatic carrier. Cows are the #1 culprit. They carry E. coli, but it does not make them sick, but they do shed it quite a bit. This can be spread through the fecal-oral route if you eat food that's contaminated with feces, or if you have touched an animal and didn't wash your hands, you can also get it that way if you touch your mouth or something. General symptoms are diarrhea. Septic shock is not as common unless you have a very severe Shiga strain, and lethargy, you just don't feel great. It's not always fatal. Most of us can ride out the infection. You just feel pretty miserable for a while. And there's nothing you can really do to treat it. And it's an extremely common foodborne illness pathogen. This little calf on the left is not having a good time. Cryptosporidium, has anyone heard of crypto? Crypto is pretty ugly. What this little kid is doing on the picture in the right, please, 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 please do not kiss calves on the face. Calves very often carry Cryptosporidium. It is a parasite. They're the major host and they form spores. So it allows it to survive in the environment when the calf sheds it in feces, and other calves can come in contact with it and get sick as well. If there's any fecal material on a calf, and if you touch it and then touch your mouth, it's likely you're going to get it. It's another fecal oral route of infection. And this is similar to Yoni's. It is extremely persistent diarrhea, dehydration, and weight loss. You just can't absorb any nutrients. It's a pretty terrible thing to have to go through. A lot of calves get it. They don't die, but they're just very emaciated and they're dehydrated. So you have to really work to get them back up to shape after a crypto infection. Humans can very easily get it, especially if you're in contact with farm animals or you're working with calves. It's really easy for you to get crypto. And unfortunately, there isn't a treatment and you are just stuck with persistent diarrhea for quite some time, which is no treat for anybody. The last one is just a fun one. It's some of you may have heard of listeria outbreaks. It's caused by Listeria monocytogenes, and I call it monocytogenes because we don't want that. Most often found in cantaloupes, mainly because the cantaloupe has a ridged rind, and if there's any dirt in there, when you cut it with a knife, you introduce the bacteria into the cantaloupe, and the flesh is the perfect environment for bacteria to grow. So it will grow in there, and that's how the contamination is passed. Raw milk and deli meat, especially turkey, are also culprits. Poor cows, again, environmental reservoir for listeria, and pregnant women are especially at risk for listeria infection because the baby can also be infected with it. Rabies reservoir is a lot of mammals in North America, as listed here. Rabies, okay, poll question, hit me in the chat with this one again.
What do you think? The most rabies cases in humans come from which two mammals? Is it raccoon and fox, bats and cats, dogs and cats, bats and dogs, or raccoons and skunks?
We got one.
Doesn't look like there's much consensus, although 1 and 5 keep showing up.
Yeah, we got 1 and 5. Okay, so all right, 3 or 5. We got a lot of consensus. Okay, so the answer actually is bats and dogs. So the canine rabies species is the most common one found worldwide as far as confirmed cases, and also bats. And the reason is that bats are so small that often people don't realize they've been bitten or scratched by the bat. Rabies is 100% fatal in both animals and humans if it's not treated. It eventually progresses to a neurologic disease and will kill you and animals. If you get bitten by an animal, it is really important that you receive rabies treatment immediately after the exposure happens, otherwise it won't work. Is that animal rabid? 2 true or false questions. Hit me in the chat.
All right, so the first one, true or false? All animals with rabies act crazy, foam at the mouth, and try to attack humans. Is that true or is that false? The second one, true or false? You can tell an animal is rabid just by looking at it, or if it's a nocturnal animal that is spotted out in the daytime.
Okay, we're getting a lot of false and false, more false and false. Second true, false, false and false. Okay, great, you guys are spot on. So the answer is that these are both false. Rabies has 2 forms. They're known as furious and dumb. So furious is what you most often see in, portrayed in a stereotypical horror film. The dog is like snapping at people, foaming, drooling, growling, just generally acting angry. And there is a dumb form of rabies where the animal is lethargic and just appears very tame and calm, like you can go pick it up and pet it. Don't do that. It's probably rabid. But just like you can't tell if someone's sick by looking at them, you can't tell if an animal is rabid just by looking at it. So some quick tips for how to prevent zoonotic disease outbreaks. If you are going to be anywhere where you're in contact with animals, wash your hands immediately after you're done with animal contact, or after you've been outside, if you may have been anywhere where there are wild animals or domestic ones. If you're at a fair or anywhere there's an agricultural exhibit, if you go on a farm tour to a petting zoo or somewhere like a U-Pick farm where there's apples and pumpkins and also goats and sheep for you to play with, just wash your hands as soon as you're done, because this is the main reason that people get sick with zoonotic disease is they don't wash their hands and they go eat something or touch their mouth after they've handled an animal. This probably is a no-brainer, but wash your fruits and vegetables. And if you get fresh eggs from someplace, make sure if they haven't been washed that you wash them before you eat them. Salmonella outbreaks come from the egg shell, not the egg itself. So make sure you're washing them thoroughly. Don't drink raw milk. If you can avoid some raw cheeses, that's recommended as well. I totally don't do that, but you're supposed to. Cook your meat to temperature. If you're going outside where there's going to be mosquitoes or ticks, wear the right clothing to protect being bitten to get pretty nasty tick and mosquito diseases. And like we just talked about with rabies, absolutely do not attempt to pet or handle a wild animal, regardless of how adorable or calm it looks, especially baby animals. So we have like a couple minutes left, so I'll just go through really quick. As I promised, like when you're sorting through the scourge of health information online, what do you look for to make sure that it's the credible source that you're looking for and that it's accurate? So it's really easy to find anything you want on the internet, as I'm sure you're all aware, but what's interesting is knowing what is credible and what's not. So those sensationalized headlines like, I lost 30 pounds in 4 days. Okay, that's probably not true, but it's definitely the clickbait that gets your attention and makes you want to learn more. And that is totally a marketing strategy. But anything that's over dramatic, too good to be true, or crazy is likely not accurate. Also, try not to fall into the confirmation bias trap, which is where people tend to believe things that align with what they already think. So if a headline comes across your page and you're kind of already feeling some kind of way about the information, it's more likely that you're going to be like, yes, I believe that. That's exactly what's going on, but that may not be the case. So what can you do if you come across some of this information and you're like, you guys seem like a pretty sharp bunch. So I would suspect maybe you do this already, but if not, what do you do when you see information that you're questioning? Check it out yourself. Find a credible source. Do your own research. Look it up to see what's going on, especially if it sounds too good to be true. Because if something sounds too good to be true, probably is. And if you're on social media, I see a lot of people do this. Don't just share blindly. And that's how bad information gets out there, especially in the early hysteria of the pandemic. People just shared and rumors were going everywhere and it didn't help anything. So that's not helpful. And also finally, consider your source. If you stop and think about where the information is coming from, is it really something you should be trusting? I don't know. Let's find out. Credible versus not credible. So take these with a grain of salt. This is what I've found over my years of research and figuring things out. For as far as health information and disease information goes, the CDC, the NIH, the WHO, and peer-reviewed academic journals, which are publications that are written by scientists and reviewed by other scientists that are experts in that field to make sure that the information is accurate and correct. These are easily available from libraries, so you guys can definitely get a hold of them if you want to. These are all considered credible, scientifically backed sources for health information. What is not, unfortunately, Facebook and Instagram. Wikipedia. Anybody and their brother can edit Wikipedia if they want to. So that is definitely not credible. Blogs are also not, because they're someone's opinion and very rarely supported with scientific fact. Your crazy Uncle Jim, or insert your favorite relative here, may not always be the best source of credible information. And random Google search items. They'll just return your keyword and what you're hoping you're going to be looking for, with the exception of Google Scholar, which will take you to these peer-reviewed academic journals and other trustworthy sources. So with that, I know we went just a little bit over and I talked a lot at you, but thank you guys so much. I really appreciated your contributions in the chat box and answering my questions. And at this time, if you have any other questions for me, let me know.
Yes, thank you, Cari. I'm going to throw up a poll right now. If you all can just answer these two questions, give us some feedback, how you like today's topic and how much you learned. So a scale of 1 to 5. And we are running over. And so Cari, if you could pop your email into the chat box.
Yep.
If anyone has a question, maybe they can reach out to you. And thank you all for taking the poll. So if you want to reach out to Cari, I know Leo was interested in the slide deck. So Leo, you can reach out to Cari for that. And then if you have any questions, just reach out to her. So Cari, thank you so much. Such an interesting topic. We appreciate you sharing your work with us today. And I know I learned a lot. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you again for having me. It was fun.